Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and, well, extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight just for you. Today, our focus is an ancient Buddhist sutta, the Cūḷadukkhakkhandhasuttaṃ.
Which, translates to the shorter discourse on the massive suffering. Quite a title.
It is, and this exploration, it's going to tackle a really fundamental question about human desire, the nature of suffering, and maybe surprisingly, different paths to true well-being.
Exactly. Our mission today is to really unpack this fascinating dialogue. It all kicks off with, a very relatable dilemma. This man, Mahānāma.
Right.
He's struggling. He knows greed, hatred, delusion. He knows they're mental defilements, but they still grab hold of his mind sometimes.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Totally. So we'll dive into the Buddha's answer, which is quite direct, actually. And then we'll get into a detailed breakdown of sensual pleasures. Why they attract us, their dangers, which are pretty profound, and how different ancient philosophies tried to tackle this whole overcoming suffering thing.
So if you've ever found yourself kind of caught in a pattern you know isn't serving you, or maybe just wondered what genuine freedom from suffering might truly feel like, well, this deep dive is definitely for you. Okay, so our journey into this text. It starts with Mahānāma. He's from the Sakyan clan, and he goes up to the Buddha. And he says, pretty candidly, he gets it. Greed, hatred, delusion, defilements of the mind. He knows this intellectually. He's learned
He
it.
got the theory down.
Exactly. But then he admits something just incredibly human. Sometimes, despite knowing better, these same defilements still overcome his mind.
Yeah.
And he asks the Buddha, what is it inside me? What unabandoned quality lets this happen? It's that gap, isn't it? Knowing versus doing. So many of us feel that.
Oh, absolutely. And what's really fascinating is the Buddha's response. It's immediate, very direct. He tells Mahānāma basically that unabandoned quality, that is the reason greed, hatred, and delusion arise.
Ah, okay, so it's the quality itself.
Precisely. And then he makes this crucial point, almost a bit provocative. He says, look, if that quality were abandoned, Mahānāma wouldn't be living the life he is. He wouldn't be living a household life, wouldn't be indulging in sensual pleasures.
Wow. Okay, so it immediately links the inner struggle to the outer life, to desire and lifestyle.
Directly, yeah.
Okay, so the Buddha's saying it's not just about knowing stuff in your head, it's deeper. And he goes on, right? He elaborates on what it really means to transcend these desires.
He does. He explains that these sensual pleasures, they offer little satisfaction, much suffering, much tribulation, and greater danger. That's the assessment.
Little satisfaction, much suffering. That's stark.
It is. But, and this is key, just seeing that danger isn't enough to be non-returning to them.
Meaning not being drawn back, truly free.
Exactly. To truly break free from that cycle of craving, you also have to find something else. You need to find a joy that is apart from sensual pleasures, apart from unwholesome states, and is more peaceful.
Ah, so it's not just about seeing the negative. You need a positive alternative, a deeper joy.
That's precisely it. The Buddha really emphasizes this. A noble disciple is only truly free, truly non-returning, when they see the dangers clearly. And at the same time, they discover this deeper, more profound sense of joy and peace.
So both sides of the coin.
Yes. And he even uses his own experience. He talks about his time as a bodhisattva, before he was fully enlightened. He says he had to fully realize the danger and discover this more peaceful joy before he could truly say he wouldn't be drawn back.
So it's a path involving both, intellectual clarity and real felt experience.
Absolutely. Understanding and realization hand in hand.
Okay, so if these sensual pleasures are such a trap leading to so much suffering, what makes them so tempting? Why are we so easily hooked? What is this gratification the Buddha mentioned?
Well, he's very specific about it. He identifies 5 strands of sensual pleasure, basically the 5 senses. So forms cognizable by the eye, things we see that are desirable, lovely, pleasing, agreeable, linked to desire, enticing.
Beautiful sights, yeah.
Exactly. And then the same applies to sounds for the ear, smells for the nose, taste for the tongue, and tangible things we feel for the body. The gratification, or the Pali word, is asada. It's precisely that pleasure and happiness that pops up when we engage with these things.
Right, that immediate hit.
That immediate hit, yeah.
Yeah.
That undeniable enjoyment from seeing something beautiful or, a delicious meal, a nice sound, a comforting touch. It's that first, that moment of satisfaction. Feels good.
Okay. But then comes the other side, and this is where it gets maybe a bit uncomfortable, but really hits home. The Buddha doesn't just leave it at gratification. He then lays out the adinava, the danger, describing sensual pleasures as a mass of suffering. And this part is incredibly detailed. It shows just how deeply our suffering is tangled up with our desires, sometimes in ways we don't even realize.
Oh, it's extensive. He gives so many examples. He starts with just the suffering involved in, say, acquiring wealth and keeping it safe.
Just making a living.
Just making a living. Think about it. Farming, trade, being a soldier, working for the government. You endure hardship. Cold, heat, bugs, hunger, thirst. The Buddha says this is a direct mass of suffering caused by that desire for wealth, for the pleasures it brings.
And what if you fail?
Then there's more suffering.
Yeah.
If you strive and fail to get wealth, you grieve, you lament, you beat your breast, you get distraught. You feel like it was all for nothing.
Okay.
But even if you succeed, you get the wealth, and immediately there's anxiety, worry about protecting it. From the government, from thieves, fire, floods, even relatives who might want it.
Right, the stress of having things.
Exactly. And then, if you lose it anyway, despite all your efforts, more grief, more lamenting, what I had is gone. It's a cycle.
And it doesn't just stop at personal finance stress, right? He connects it to bigger conflicts, too.
Oh, absolutely. He clearly shows how sensual pleasures are the root cause, the origin, the condition for conflict at pretty much every level.
Every level.
Yeah, kings fighting kings, nobles fighting nobles, right down to arguments within families. Mother versus son, father versus son, siblings, friends turning on friends, all driven by desire for these pleasures or the means to get them.
And these arguments can get serious.
They escalate. Physical violence, hitting, throwing things, using sticks, knives, leading to injury, death, terrible suffering. And he scales it up even further. Warfare.
Wow.
People take up weapons, rush into battle, get hit by arrows, spears, get their heads cut off. Intense suffering, death, all driven ultimately by sensual desire. Sieges of fortresses, same thing, enduring horrific conditions, violence, death.
So thinking about someone just living a regular life today, hearing this, it sounds almost inescapable, like a suffocating web.
Well, the Buddha seems to want to show just how pervasive it is. He continues demonstrating this inescapability by linking sensual desires directly to crime and punishment, too.
Crime? How so?
Desire pushes people, he says, to break into houses, steal, commit robbery, commit adultery. And for these actions, the consequences are severe. Kings inflict brutal punishments.
Like what?
Public whippings, beatings, really horrific tortures described in the text. Things like the necklace of fire, hand torch, impalement, beheading, all causing immense suffering and death.
That's graphic.
It is. And he doesn't stop there. Finally, he links sensual desires to misconduct, bad actions of body, speech, and mind. And this misconduct, he explains, leads to rebirth after death in states of suffering. Bad destinations, the underworld, hell.
So consequences even beyond this life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the future suffering component. The implication is really stark. Chasing sensual pleasure has these ripple effects, consequences that stretch far beyond our current existence. It impacts our well-being across lifetimes, according to this view.
Okay, so with all this suffering painted as flowing directly from sensual desires, it kind of makes sense that some people would look for a completely different way out, maybe something extreme, like asceticism. And the Siddha brings this up, right? There's this fascinating encounter with another group, the Nigaṇṭhas.
Yes, the Nigaṇṭhas, who are generally identified with the Jains. It's a really interesting contrast. The Buddha finds them practicing intense self-mortification.
No, are they dying?
Standing rigidly, refusing to sit down, basically enduring constant, painful, sharp, bitter physical sensations, purposefully.
Ouch. Why? Why would they do that?
So the Buddha asks them, and they explain their philosophy, which they attribute to their leader, Nigaṇṭhas. They believe that any bad kāma, bad actions from the past gets worn away or exhausted through these kinds of severe practices. Austerity burns it off.
Okay.
And at the same time, by practicing restraint now in body, speech, and mind, they stop creating new bad kāma.
So stop the inflow, burn off the backlog.
Pretty much. Exhaust the old, prevent the new. Through this, they believe, kāma gets destroyed, suffering gets destroyed, feelings associated with suffering get destroyed, and eventually all suffering will just be worn away entirely. And they say, you know, we find this teaching agreeable. They like it.
But the Buddha, he doesn't just nod along, does he? He challenges them pretty directly.
He really does.
Yeah.
He doesn't accept it at face value at all. He starts asking these very pointed questions, really probing the foundation of their belief.
Like what kind of questions?
He asks them if they actually know certain things. Like, do you know if you existed in the past?
And they say,
They admit no. Do you know if you actually committed bad kāma in the past? No. Do you know what kind of bad kāma you supposedly committed? No.
huh. So they don't know the specifics of what they're trying to burn off.
Exactly. And he keeps going. Do you know how much suffering you've already worn away? How much is left when it will all finally be gone? Again, no. And maybe the most critical one. Do you know for a fact that you're abandoning unwholesome states and developing wholesome states right now in this very life?
And the answer is still.
Still no. So the Buddha points out, the lack of logic here. If you don't actually know any of this for yourselves, how can you be so sure this painful path is working or even necessary?
Yeah, that's a strong point.
He even makes this slightly cutting remark, suggesting that if their theory was true, then maybe really cruel, bloodthirsty people could just become Nigaṇṭhas for a bit and erase all their past deeds. It's a sharp critique of the basis of their practice.
So how do the Nigaṇṭhas respond to that? They must have pushed back.
They do. They counter with their own challenge. They basically say, look, pleasure isn't attained through pleasure. Pleasure is attained through suffering. That's their core belief.
Suffering leads to pleasure.
Yes. And they use an example. King Bimbisāra of Magadha. He's a powerful king, living in luxury. They argue, well, if pleasure led directly to pleasure, then surely the king, surrounded by comforts, would attain ultimate pleasure much more easily than the Buddha, who gave up those comforts.
Okay, so they're contrasting the king's life with the Buddha's.
Exactly. But the Buddha points out it was a rather rash statement, not well thought through.
How so?
He masterfully turns the tables on them. He asks them a question. Okay, you mentioned King Bimbisāra. Can he, this king living in pleasure, remain totally motionless in body, completely silent in speech, and experience nothing but pure, unadulterated pleasure for even one whole day, let alone, say, 7 days straight?
Probably not. Too many distractions, duties, life.
And the Nigaṇṭhas have to admit it. No, the king can't do that. Then the Buddha makes his assertion. He says that he can. He can dwell motionless, silent, experiencing pure pleasure. A different kind of pleasure, mind you, for 1 day, 2 days, up to 7 days.
A different kind of pleasure, like
Right.
that peaceful joy he mentioned earlier.
Precisely. A joy independent of the senses. So he asks them, based on this ability, who then lives more pleasantly, King Bimbisāra or I?
And what can they say?
They are forced to concede. They answer, the venerable Gautama the Buddha lives more pleasantly than King Bimbisāra.
Wow, that really flips their argument on its head. It powerfully concludes that whole exchange, redefining what real pleasure, real well-being actually means. That was. Yeah, truly an insightful exploration of this text. We've really unpacked Mahānāma's struggle, which feels so familiar, haven't we?
That initial question is so relatable.
And then exploring the subtle allure of sensual pleasures, why we're drawn in, but then confronting their really vast, often hidden dangers, everything from our own daily anxieties right up to global conflict, even thinking about future consequences.
It covers so much ground. And we also saw that really striking contrast between these different paths for dealing with suffering. You have the extreme asceticism of the Nigaṇṭhas, which is rooted in this idea that you have to sort of suffer for suffering's sake to burn off karma.
Right, paying a debt through pain.
Yeah, exactly. Versus the Buddha's path, which ultimately leads to something completely different. This profound, unwavering, really peaceful joy that completely transcends all those sensual entanglements.
So it's not about punishing yourself.
Not at all. What that exchange really highlights is that the Buddhist path isn't about denial just for the sake of denial, or self-mortification as the goal. It's about finding a different kind of happiness, a joy so deep and stable that suffering just loses its grip. It's a path of cultivating skillful happiness, you could say, not just enduring pain.
So thinking about all this, what really stands out to you listening to this deep dive? Maybe it's that surprising connection the text draws between our personal desires and widespread conflict. That was quite something.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Or perhaps it's just the profound idea that true, lasting happiness, maybe it isn't found in chasing more and more external things, more gratifications, but in cultivating an inner state that actually surpasses them all.
Yeah. And maybe consider this. If this mass of suffering the Sutta describes is so deeply, intricately linked to chasing and holding on to sensual pleasures, maybe just reflect on one small area in your own life. Is there a space where you could explore cultivating a little bit more of that peaceful joy, something that lies beyond just those 5 strands of sensory input? Just asking, how might understanding this ancient perspective even slightly shift your daily priorities? Or maybe just change your approach to finding contentment day to day. Something to think about.